I finally pulled the trigger on buying a sickle bar for my tractor, and I can tell you it was worth every penny. In this video, I'll be showing you real-world testing of Agrishield's ProCut Sickle bar and show you what it can cut, what it can't cut, and how it held up after a day of use trimming both sides of about a mile of wooded back trails. Before I get into showing you everything, let me explain how I ended up with Agrishield's ProCut Sickle bar. I was doing some research online on these things, and most of the options that were coming up seem rather gimmicky with silly names, and I don't know, they didn't really seem all that robust. And eventually I came across Agrishield's ProCut Sickle bar and noticed that there really wasn't any information about it online. So I ended up calling them, and they explained to me that, oh yeah, this sickle bar is sort of a new product for them, but it's not really a new thing that they've been making. They've been in the vineyard industry for about 10 years now, and essentially this sickle bar has been part of their vineyard equipment for all of that time. I think they said about 8 years this particular design has been in operation. But people started reaching out to them saying, hey, we'd like just that bar to trim trails and use it on our property and not trim vineyards. And so they sort of adapted their product into this new market, and here they are. But it's rather new on the market, so there's not been a lot of YouTube videos like I'm making right now on this, so I wanted to make one. So after talking to the owners for a while, I came to the conclusion that this probably was a really good product, and I wanted to give it a shot. It looked stout, and I can tell you after a day using it, it is stout, because I definitely didn't baby it at all. Now, the version of the sickle bar that I ended up with was the 54-inch sickle bar. I got the quick attach system and 1/2-inch lines from them. One of the things about this unit is it requires about 4 to 8 gallons per minute, and you want to run it through something like a 1/2-inch line because anything smaller, it might heat up too much and cause problems for you. Because unfortunately, I have very convenient third function valves in the front here, but they're 3/8 from Kubota, and I didn't want to risk it. So I've run a 1/2-inch line to my rear connections, and it's working great that way. For the rest of the video, I'll be showing you this thing in action in real time. I'll be cutting some tall grass, some light brush, and a respectable amount of thicker brush, and I'll push this thing to the limits of what it can cut and what it can't cut. I have a few different segments organized into chapters, so if you're only looking for particular things, you can hop around the video to find that. So sit back and relax to the methodical chopping of Agrishield's ProCut Sickle bar. To get used to using the ProCut Sickle bar, I started with some tall grass that we had. I just wanted to make sure I understood how it worked and work out any kinks before I started cutting anything thicker. And as you can see, it cut through this stuff perfectly fine. If anything, I probably should have turned the speed up a little bit. Per the directions, it says you should have the RPMs of the motor around 150 to 200, and I was trying to be in that range, and I think for tall grass, you could go a little bit higher without any issues. Here I'm getting into my first light brush. It still was working really well, and as I was sort of figuring it out, I was sort of hesitant before I went into each thing as it got thicker. And as you can see here, it's not having any problems with any of this stuff, so I just kept chugging along. Now I get into a nice bushy mess of stuff, and this is where this thing really shines. This kind of stuff is a real pain to deal with any other way, and the sickle bar here you can basically just change the position, and now I'm starting with kind of undercutting it in the horizontal position, and later I come back and cut it in the vertical position. Now I've rotated it into its vertical position, and you can really see how useful this sickle bar is. I'm just going along the trail in an area I'd normally be unable to really do anything about unless I went along with a hedge trimmer or clippers and manually just cut it, or came in with the tractor bucket and just pushed the forest back, which is what my dad has been doing for the last 20 years, and that works, but it is such a pain in the butt to do, and we don't do it very often because of that. This is really creating a much cleaner look in the end. So one of the things you'll definitely run into from time to time is material will build up on the sickle bar. Really, it doesn't cause any problem whatsoever. It continues working, but it gets a little bit hard to see from time to time. And I figured that you just sort of tilt the whole unit down and maybe back up a little bit, and the stuff just falls off and you continue going. So it's not really a big deal. And it's just so satisfying when you can take this through some really thick, light brush and just cut a nice straight line out of it. Until the next chapter, I'm just going to let the video roll and show you what this thing can cut as you're going through what I would think is pretty typical situations of the kind of brush you'd want to clear on trails and that sort of thing that you would want this kind of a tool for. In the clip so far, these are trails that we've sort of maintained manually or in other ways over the past few years, and Now let me show you kind of a different perspective of me cutting something that we really never have touched. We don't trim it at all. This is kind of virgin stuff that was like, oh, finally we can cut this without wasting a lot of manual effort. There's a mix of branches that are certainly too big for me to cut and stuff that it can handle. And I'm just gonna kind of go through and you'll see how it does. What's nice about a sickle bar that you can attach to the front of your tractor is that you can really adjust how high you want to cut, and you have a lot more versatility of what you can do with this thing. Some of these things that you hook up to the back of your tractor seem, one, a little bit flimsy and harder to use because you're cutting behind you, so you first have to drive through the place you want to cut. It really doesn't seem all that useful doing it that way. But here I am kind of doing two passes where I do a low pass and a high pass, and I can really manipulate it pretty nicely to accomplish what I need to accomplish. Look at that nice close-up of me cutting through something pretty thick. It can be kind of difficult to show you on camera just how much this is trimming. So we tried a couple of times to get a good perspective of how this thing can kind of cut through material. I think this scene really gives you a good picture of just how capable of trimming trails and whatever this thing really is.
Can you take a deeper one? Do it.
Now I'll show you one time lapse of me clearing a little section just to give you an idea of how quick it is. This whole thing, doing the two passes, took me about 7.5 minutes. And if you watch closely here, here's a little before and then after. Adjusting the ProCut sickle position is pretty straightforward. There are 4 bolts that press against the horizontal tube and lock it into position. You loosen them up and then you'll be able to slide the tube to the location that you want. To rotate the sickle bar, you loosen 2 bolts that clamp the pivot tube to the horizontal tube so that you can rotate the sickle bar to the desired position. Then when you have it in position, you just tighten everything back up and you're good to go. When originally looking at the ProCut online, I was a little concerned the angle setting feature was not really sufficient, but from using the ProCut I realized it's just right. It holds it tight enough to keep the angle as you're bouncing along and cutting through brush, but if you get tangled up, the sickle bar will rotate in the clamp before you bend something. Okay, so humorously enough, in the first 10 seconds of me using this thing on that tall grass, I ran into a big branch and hit it right on the Y, which was super thick, and it got jammed up. So at first I threw the piece out of the way and then thought, well, why don't I see how thick of stuff this thing can cut? So I did a kind of a test. Now, I don't know what kind of wood this is, but I know when I have to deal with this, typically I'm using loppers on it, and it's really hard to cut. It's pretty hard whatever it is, and this thing seems to be able to cut pretty darn thick stuff, sort of by itself when I just am testing it manually. What's interesting is when this thing rotates, there's actually springs in the sickle bar arm that let it sort of load up into a cut, and then it'll kind of spring forward and cut through, which lets it not be so hard on the equipment. It seems a little odd because it sort of slows down for a moment and then all of a sudden pushes forward, but that's by design. Here's a perfect example of me getting it jammed up and the safety mechanism activating. It's not really a big deal when this happens. You got to be paying attention so you don't just keep on driving. But you basically hit the thing, it might get pushed back, and then you just need to back up maybe and basically get the item clear that's stuck. For me, I would sort of work the hydraulic actuator kind of the in and out and do it different directions, and that would free anything that I had to deal with. When this stuff jams up, what's happening is it basically activates your pressure relief valve inside your tractor, no different than if you hit the maximum stroke on any of your cylinders. So functionally, this is a pretty typical thing. Now, you should avoid doing that constantly, but it's not really a big deal if the unit gets stopped. And now you can just see a couple of different clips of me getting it jammed up and how you handle it. Really not a big deal. And once you really learn what you can and can't do with the unit, you get good at sort of working it around the stuff that you're pretty sure you're going to get jammed up on. And this is just sort of a funny scene to me of me cutting things I know it'll cut and then working my way around the items that I think are a little bit too big for it. And I can come back later with some other cutting implement to work my way through it. And to wrap up, I will show you what it can cut that is pretty thick. Here's a good little kind of transitional clip of me getting jammed up, but coming at it again, and sure enough, I was able to cut the pretty thick branch. And now I'll show you a couple of what I think are pretty thick and difficult cuts that this thing seems to have no big trouble with. And absolutely the most valuable part of the ProCut Sickle Bar is that it can cut through briars. I hate dealing with briars, but you just come in at it at a nice horizontal cut, cut into it, then you come back again with a vertical cut, cut into it, and it just goes away. I like that. So I'm gonna show this to you as my last clip of my video because it's just so satisfying to me. This briar bush has been hurting me for years, and now it's gone. So here's a look at the sickle blade sections after a day of use. As you can see, that second blade got pretty beat up, and that actually happened in the first 10 minutes of me using the unit. I hit that big branch and I took a big chip out of it, and actually throughout the day I was watching it slowly get worse and worse. But otherwise, you just lose a little bit of the serration sometimes when you get into the bigger stuff, and they'll keep working for a long while. They only cost $2.50 a piece to replace, so clearly they're meant to be a consumable. So I hope this video has given you a good idea of what this thing is capable of. I think it's absolutely worth the money because it has saved me so much labor that I used to have to do by hand, and its biggest value to me is that we have a brush hog that I like to trim basically one brush hog width of the trail off the trail to keep everything out. But it gets so messy on the stuff that grows out this way that I can't get at, and then I'm getting all torn up as I'm running through the woods with that thing. And this sickle bar is gonna save me so much literal pain, and I'm excited about that going forward. Now, I was gonna buy this thing regardless, but talking with Agrishield, and since I have a YouTube channel, I did talk them into giving me a coupon code for you guys. And if you put in Bensing at checkout, you can get $150 off one of these ProCuts. And of course, I'd appreciate if you liked the video, if it was useful to you. And if you have any questions for me, I'm very responsive in the comments. Post them below and I'll get back to you on it. And if there's any other content you'd like to see of me using this thing, let me know. I was using it in this video when it was still kind of winter, and now the leaves are starting to come out. So I have a whole different environment to cut in now, and I do still have some more trails to clear for the year. So I can do quite a few videos on different things. So that's all I got for you. And as always, have a good one.